I would like to close by reading a very brief excerpt from the report of the Air Force's Scientific Advisory Board, which they made recently upon completing a detailed review of the subject of UFO. This is a statement. The committee concluded that in the 19 years since the first UFO was sighted, there has been no evidence that unidentified flying objects are a threat to our national security.
Igual está todo.
They had what was called, in the last months of Trump's presidency, the COVID relief bill. You think, well, what do UFOs have to do with COVID? Nothing. But it was the kind of bill you could add things on. And the UAP study was one of those things that was added to it. It was going to go through Congress anyway, and hey presto, out came the preliminary report.
As ufologists, we were waiting for this long-awaited report coming from the Pentagon, which is allegedly going to blow the lid on the UFO phenomena and give us more answers to what we've been looking at. So I was really surprised when it came out. It was only about 9 pages or so when it officially came out.
What's interesting is the onslaught of this release of a document with regards to the UAPs. How many pages was it? 9 pages? And did the world react to it? No. It's alarming.
Clearly, within the lines of that report, they were saying that there were objects that defied explanation. Is it our own technology? Is it the Chinese? Is it the Russians? Because at the end of the day, come what may, they've got to look at this in an objective manner.
We found out that there had been a secret study called ATIP, AATIP, Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, that as part of its work looked into UFOs. Nobody knew that that existed up until 2017, when it was released in the New York Times. Governments have secrets. It's part and parcel of governments is to keep secrets.
If there was an admittance by the establishments that UFOs and aliens were real, it would cast doubt upon their authenticity, because they have concealed this subject for decades. You know, looking for life out there is brilliant, but then will the establishments tell us the truth? No. And we're finding that over and over again. So no matter what is found, what is discovered, what is brought to the table, if it's a threat to, you know, society, or, you know, it's something the military establishments, most notably the military establishments, want to keep secret, you can bet your bottom dollar they'll bury it. They'll patent it and push it away.
You imagine being in their position. They've managed to keep a tight lid on it for 70 years. And so they've become absolute masters at covering things up and putting out alternative theories so that the public are sort of dissuaded from believing what's really happening.
Things need to change. I think it's time to stand up and say we're fed up being lied to. Someone in the military is sick and tired of the lies and the disinformation that they keep bringing forward and, you know, fobbing off to the general public, someone wanted this out. And I'm glad that they did, because they were the only ones that could do this. If it was like the likes of me or, you know, someone else coming forward with, oh, look at this film footage of this UFO, they wouldn't buy it, they wouldn't have it. It had to come from an official source.
Well, mainly they focused on a criteria, a couple of hundred or so sightings that was particularly unusual.
But think about it, that's a lot. Out of that, only one they could identify.
It's okay looking at a still picture of something from a distance, but you're not getting the perspective of how big it is, how it's moving or anything else. When you look at the one they identified that was a Batman balloon, as it was zoomed in, it was quite obvious.
They did say if they looked into some of the others, they might also fall into similar categories, you know, balloons, astronomical objects. What it does show is that A, they're looking at them properly, they're not just taking them at face value. And it also shows that even though you are a member of the US military, you can be fooled. If you're a pilot and you report X, we have to believe you, simply because you're a pilot. All pilots are like you and I, they're human. They have their own belief systems and they can make mistakes.
Straight away you could tell it was nothing of the sort. And it was a bit misleading that they actually released that as being a UFO when it so obviously wasn't.
And all of the cases come from military sources. So there's no reports from members of the public.
We're really getting into the nitty-gritty now. They're talking about appearing on the wingtips.
We'll go back to ATIP. Nobody had a clue. Nobody. Because it was small, it was somewhere within the Department of Defense, didn't have a huge staff. It's like the old story, I'm going to tell you this, but don't tell anybody. I'm only telling you because you're my best mate. So I tell you the story, and then you go and tell your next best mate, and he'd go and tell, and eventually it comes out. You know, that's just the way human nature is. But nobody had a clue, nothing. So we have to remember that when they want to, the government can keep secrets, they really can. It's given rise to suspicion, well, are they other? Have we got an ATIP version? Well, the Ministry of Defence, if you ask them, are bound to say no because it's secret, you know? So there is no point in asking in the first place. It's unlikely, but you can't rule it out. It was only going a small number of years. I think they spent 20-some million pounds, and it's claimed that Luis Elizondo was the head of it. And he had become dissatisfied that they weren't making enough progress. In other words, I think there was obstacles put in, not just in the way, but purposely put in the way. He felt that the phenomena was worthy of study because of what the information that they had gathered. So he resigned. And it was only because he resigned that he eventually went public with the support of, you know, various politicians and UFO researchers as well, and the rest has followed.
When someone comes to you who's in charge of a multi-million-dollar weapon platform, who maintains a top-secret security clearance, who is paid and trusted by this country to go fight wars and to fly over cities with live munitions, and by the way, they're trained observers with millions of dollars invested in their training.
Yep.
I would submit to you it's pretty compelling, but on top of that, it's not just the eyewitness testimony. It is actual electro-optical data and radar return.
Elizondo will tell you, he said, there's a lot more to come because I saw it.
It should have been a real in-depth report with it being such an important subject.
I believe there's a classified version of this. We were speaking with some of my colleagues the other day about that. I think it's about 96, 97 pages long. And it really goes into the nitty-gritty of what they truly believe is behind these wonderful footage. I would like to think that that report will also come out. But if it does, will it be doctored? Will it be heavily censored? I mean, the American government have now agreed and lifted the secrecy on the Tic Tac UFOs. And so therefore, I would like to think that maybe this ongoing report will come out and show us more, a lot more.
The government is multifaceted. There are times when one department doesn't know what the other department's doing. It's on a need-to-know basis. You don't need to know that the elephant's got ears. You're working on the trunk, you know? It's as simple as that. And that could be another reason why they've tailored the UAP task force. Now, you don't need to know. It comes through us, and you lot out there, you don't need to. We need to know, you don't.
If they did come...
One thing that I noticed in the Pentagon's report, there was one chapter which was also in a different colour, and it was trying to do away with the stigma that's attached to the subject and encourage the various military people to come forward.
In the old days, if they had reported something or tracked it on radar while in flight, they were ordered not to speak about it. They were told that they had to sign a form to say that that is top secret, and otherwise they'd lose their jobs. I think now that this admittance by the Navy has certainly, you know, brought a lot of people out, and it's given us hope in the fact that if these guys are saying they're real, then obviously we're dealing with something that is an unusual phenomena.
You may have noticed a lady pilot called Alex Dietrich. She was one of those involved in the Tic Tac sightings. She was a Top Gun fighter pilot. She has no interest in the subject, but she came out of the woodwork, went on the record, simply to show, look, if you report these sightings, forget the conspiracy theories. You're not going to lose your pension. You're not going to get fired, you know. And she was openly encouraging others to do exactly the same as she had. So I think that's a very positive move, I really do.
We are here today to disclose the truth about a subject that has been ridiculed and questioned, denied for at least 50 years. The men and women who are on this stage and the some 350 additional military intelligence witnesses to the so-called UFO matter and extraterrestrial intelligence can prove and will prove that we are not alone.
Well, what we have to bear in mind is that many of these naval personnel, military personnel, Air Force personnel have signed the Official Secrets Act. And back in 2001 at the American Press Club, all these generals are lined up, medals, braids, and all the rest. And I went, here we go, at last. But these are not men in the street. These are military men who's had their own UFO sightings. Sightings of strange craft above silos, switching off the silos, etc., missiles, the Minuteman missile. A lot of these guys are there to tell the media and the press, and they told their stories of what they saw. And then it was yesterday's news. And I was so disappointed at that. So when the Pentagon report came out, I says, I was fearful, are we going to get the real deal here? But it came out and they did say something that I was not expecting. We can't identify these objects.
What they have confirmed, like our own Ministry of Defence have been saying for years, yes, we know there are things in the sky that we can't identify, but unless they're a threat, we're not interested. The US Department of Defense have gone one further and said, yeah, we just don't know what they are yet.
Have any targets up here? We just had something go right over the top of us.
Commercial airlines certainly have a role to play, because earlier this year there was a commercial flight, the voice cockpit recordings being released. Part of New Mexico they were flying.
I hate to say this, looked like a long cylindrical object. It almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast that went right over the top of us.
You can hear the surprise in his voice. He's not frightened or anything like that, but you can hear the excitement and surprise in his voice. So they certainly have a role to play. Maybe that's something they might bring in further down the road. Again, we'll have to wait and see, but it wouldn't surprise me, let's put it that way. We do know that when the Russians did a study, they included civilian pilots. Governments do take it seriously, but it's to what degree and what they are looking for when it comes to the UFO subject. For example, when you look at our own Ministry of Defence, they've been involved with it since the 1950s. And they've consistently said that they only looked at UFOs from a defence point of view, i.e., were any of these sightings incursions by our enemies? In other words, the Soviets that it used to be, or the Russians. Once they could discount that, then that was it. They didn't look any further. So yes, they took it serious, but for different reasons. The French have taken it very seriously, and part of their space program looks at UFO sightings. So it depends from, from country to country. The United States has had a strange relationship with the subject. It's pretended to look at it seriously, but at the end of the day, it never really fulfilled the remit. It was like on your school report, could have done better.
The fact of the matter remains that they've now put themselves on a pedestal where they have come forward with these sightings. There's a lot of stuff pre-2004 that demanded scrutiny as well.
I am here to discuss.
Interesting sightings went elsewhere, and Hynek never saw them, and he never found out about them. But he found out enough that it changed his mind, let's put it that way.
The most probable answer was observation by extraterrestrial beings or controlled machines making observations of the Earth. Now this is exactly what the Air Force said in 1948. They've had a top secret estimate of the situation which said that these things were interplanetary devices. And they've denied it for years, but finally it was admitted.
I think they've learned from things like Project Blue Book, where if you have a free-for-all, you basically have too much data, and they don't have the people to go out and investigate it. Whereas if it's from a military source, it can pretty much be investigated at source at the time. And it can be recorded on multiple formats, as well as the various cameras that they have, the various types of radar and what else, whereas civilians can't do that. It should also mean that there's no hoaxes. Because if you're in the military and you submit a hoax, I think that, you're going to spend a long time in whatever the American equivalent is to Siberia.
I'll tell you, I've spent years on this thing, just trying to get this top secret estimate. I beg pardon? Lieutenant Colonel George Freeman, spokesman, Air Force Headquarters spokesman on UFOs, who wrote a lot of letters, and official letters explaining these things. Now, this was sent to the head of our subcommittee in London, who's a capable investigator. But the point is, the letter stated that the information, this was first revealed by Ruppelt, who was the head of Project Blue Book for a while. The Air Force, for some reason, felt they should deny it, and it was denied by people on up to the rank of general. We could produce dozens of letters they sent to congressmen, senators, denying there ever was such a thing.
This is the thing about this subject. Trust is broken, and it's so hard to come by good trust in it.
Thank you, Colonel Packer, Major Quintanilla. I would like to close by reading a very brief excerpt from the report of the Air Force's Scientific Advisory Board, which they made recently upon completing a detailed review of the subject of UFO. This is a statement. The committee concluded that in the 19 years since the first UFO was sighted, there has been no evidence that unidentified flying objects are a threat to our national security.
Whilst they had a job to do, whilst they had to look as if they're doing a job and doing it properly, I still think that the criteria was that they were just not truly interested in what it was. Because it was all billed as alien technology, they just veered away from it. Now we have total different ballparks, a total different ballpark.
I thought it was nonsense. Complete nonsense. It took reading hundreds of reports and talking with hundreds of witnesses, many pounds and others, before I was convinced.
Are they being controlled by men on Earth or by men?
No, I'm not referring to the ones which have such high speeds and maneuvers at high speeds. They're completely beyond possibility of anything that we have now or even planning. The speech and the Air Force has put some of these on record. There was one case that they never have explained. It was where an object, a very large object, was seen, was tracked by radar, and a number of small objects which were tracked 50 to 140 miles an hour from a B-29. And people on board the B-29 saw the small objects. They merged with the big one, which then accelerated to over 9,000 and went off the scope. Or remote control. By alien of whom we know nothing.
I mean, I was a skeptic myself. Skepticism is fine. We do need the skeptics. A coin in your pocket has a head and a tail. It doesn't have two heads unless you're a magician. We do need the other side of the fence.
Reports of strange flying objects in the sky are older than the United States. Some of them reported in scientific journals that date back to the 16th century, but they've usually been classed with Loch Ness monsters and relegated to the Sunday supplements, until World War II showed us that some of the most fantastic dreams can be very real, like atomic bombs, for instance. And since the close of the war, hundreds of reports of strange objects in the sky have been filed with the Air Force, and most of them have been easily explained. Experimental jet aircraft, weather balloons, reflected ground lights, unusual...
Are real, no matter what they may be. They clearly are real. It's a substantial enigma. It's been with us through countless millennia. God bless all those people who's come forward and told their stories.
I have seen UFOs, and so I don't need persuading. I've seen these objects in the sky.
Are you looking for little green men or what?
No, no, not little green men or women.
But even the BBC Newsnight has covered the subject, which is unheard of. And they didn't laugh at it either. I watched it, I was amazed when it came on.
Now, it's not often we get to discuss UFOs on this programme, not often enough, you might say, but tonight the Pentagon has given us the perfect excuse. A former defence official has told CNBC that when it comes to UFOs, the US has a massive intelligence failure on its hands. Next month, Congress is set to be briefed on UFOs when a long-awaited Pentagon report is released. In April last year, the US Department of Defense authorized the release of 3 historical US Navy videos depicting unidentified aerial phenomena.
So there has been a complete transformation, so long as the media is concerned, which we've always told them that the subject is interesting enough without you making fun of it.
The lid is now off the proverbial tin. We're now looking at a phenomena that is, yes, it's been with us through millennia, but it seems to be increasing.
What the report and the attendant press coverage has already done, and I've said it on a few interviews, I told you so.
Will be kept in the dark, and we will be kept at arm's length until we learn to move forward.
Mankind will never, never, never learn anything if we turn away. Science will never progress if we turn away. You may not believe a word of this, but by golly, have a look, because the evidence, when you look at it, is impressive. It's there all day long. Yes, there's a lot of falsehoods out there. Yes, there's a lot of hoaxes. But once you move that away, you're left looking at gems, fantastic UFO reports.